All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Lydia, and I work at both the Queen's International Center and Student Academic Success Services, and I'm one of the organizers of this week's conference. And so today we have our theme for the conference is celebrating you. And so we have a bit of a special session for you where we're going to do a live recording of a bonus episode of season 1 of International Voices at Queen's podcast. And so we'll get started with that in just a few minutes. And also have a land acknowledgement as part of the live podcast. But I also want to let you know that the Celebrating You theme continues. On Sunday, there is a concert happening, Isfahan concert, where we gave away 20 student tickets as part of this week's conference. So there are 20 students now attending that conference and many others. And so you can watch this conference live stream if you'd like. You can also still purchase tickets. I spoke with the Isabel Bader Center. There are still tickets available if you're interested in attending in person. But in the chat there, you will see a link to purchase tickets and a link to the live stream. It's happening on Sunday at 2:30 p.m. And Sadaf Amini, who is one of the musicians who will be playing at the concert. She did all of the music for our podcast, International Voices at Queen's. So it's been great partnering with her through this project. But for now, I'm going to pass it over to Amir to get started with our live podcast.
All right. Hello, everybody. This is Amir, and you're listening to International Voices at Queen's, a supportive listening space for members of the university community, recorded on the occupied lands of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. So,
yes, hello. So usually we have some music there, and we will have some music there as part of when we release the podcast. But yes, hello, everyone. My name is Lydia, and I work at the Queen's International Center and Student Academic Success Services, and I'm here with my colleague, Alyssa Foerstner.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
So Alyssa and I have been behind the scenes throughout the planning and recording of season 1. You haven't really heard our voices before, but this week, as part of the International Education at Queen's Conference, we are recording a special live episode of our podcast. So now Alyssa and I are taking on the roles of interviewers to speak not only with Amir, who hosted season 1 of International Voices at Queen's, but also Colette Steer, who is the host of another excellent Queen's podcast called Grad Chat. And we were talking earlier, she has done, I think, over 100, maybe close to 200 episodes of that podcast. So, yeah.
Yeah, Colette and Amir, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's start by taking a minute to introduce yourselves to our audience. And Colette, I'll start with you, please.
Yeah, g'day. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me to the show. So a little bit about my background. Some people think that I have a bit of a strange accent, even though it is an English accent. But my background is I was born in the UK, in a little place called Kidsgrove, and we used to talk like, you know, if I want to say, can I have a look at your book? It used to be, give us a look at your book, and things like that. So you can see my accent's changed a little bit. And then it changed a little bit more because my family emigrated to Australia when I was 10. And so I've picked up a bit of the Aussie accent, not quite as strong as those born in Australia, but I have picked up some of that. And then before coming to Canada, I also lived in New Zealand for a couple of years. So I picked up a bit of the Kiwi accent. So if every now and then I switch my I's and E's around, then you know that's it. Now, luckily for me, it was all English. It was just different versions of English. And so even coming to Canada, I've had to pick up some new words like A and things like that. So, you know, even in my journey, English is my first language, but I've had to learn a lot of different ways of speaking English along the way. And you know what? I'm trying to convert those Canadians, not quite there yet, but anyway, we will get there. But that's a little bit about me. And now I've been working at Queen's since 2007 in the School of Graduate Studies.
Well, thanks so much, Colette. I can't wait to hear more about your experience at Queen's and specifically with Grad Chat. AmirHossein, Amir, would you please introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. My full name is AmirHossein Sojoodi. I'm from Iran. I study computer engineering at Queen's. I've started on January 2020, a little bit before the pandemic happened. And I was very lucky enough to see the campus before we got locked down. And then I was the host of the first season of International Voices. And I'm so happy to be here with you guys today.
Well, thank you both for those introductions. My next question for you is, what was your intention in getting involved in a podcast at Queen's?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I never thought about doing an English podcast before. It wasn't even in my wildest dreams. But when Alyssa told me that, look, we have this project to work on, and they offered me the position of the host, I was like, am I crazy, or am I seeing sleepy? It was like something that never happened to me before. And I discussed with my wife about it, and she told me, this is something that you've always wanted to do. I know that's in English, but go for it. Try to develop your English speaking and try to involve in other things than academia. So when I think about it, I have some internal desire to share what I learned with people. So I believe that when individual members of a community help each other grow, they can grow together as a group more efficiently this way. So, and I can remember that I participated in a workshop when I was in my undergrad in Iran. The workshop was about documentation, and it was fascinating for me that how documentation can help people save their time so much, and it helps the community to grow very effectively. So with that in mind, when we talked about Alyssa and Lydia, that well, this is the topics that we want to talk about them. These are narrowed down subjects. Well, at that point, I realized that their intentions were aligned with mine. So I can, in this podcast, I could see that I can address some of the international students' challenges and provide them with friendly environments so that they can share the stories with other people. And of course, along the way, we realized that it has a great potential to highlight Queen's services. And so I said yes, and then I'm very happy that I did this job. So,
well, I think I know Alyssa and I are very happy that you did this too for us for season one. You shared so many stories and then connected so well with all of the different guests that we had on the podcast, and then also made great recommendations to services at Queen's, which I know you have also utilized well. You've really, I think you shared with me the other day how many workshops you attended. Do you remember what the number is?
Yeah, I counted them, and I think it was around more than 95 workshops, general workshops and seminars that I've attended so far since January 2020. Yeah.
Yeah, that's impressive, and so good for you for making use of all the supports that are available at Queen's, but then also promoting them and wanting others to know about them as well. So yeah, thanks. How about you, Colette? What was your intention in getting involved in a podcast at Queen's?
Well, I think a little bit like Amir, I kind of got volunteered into doing it when CFRC came to me in the School of Graduate Studies and said, would you like to put a program together for grad students to showcase grad student research? And at the time I said, God, that is a fantastic idea. What a great way to get our students an opportunity to disseminate their work. I said, absolutely, I can get some students involved. Who do you want? Who's going to be the host, etc. And then they said, well, we thought you could be the host. And it was like, oh, really? So you realize I've never done any of this before. And again, no, you'll be perfect because you've got a different accent. It's not a Canadian accent. It might sort of pull people in. I go, okay, well, I guess maybe being a bit whimsical, that'll work. So I gave it a go. And so in the beginning, it really was, our grad chat was really just about being on the air on CFRC, which it still is since January 2016. But a part of that, I also said, well, I don't just want it to be a one-off 30-minute show and then no one hears it again. So we started way back in the School of Graduate Studies before CFRC started to do more podcasting, of converting our ed show into a podcast. And one of the things that's good about that, again, it gives more opportunities for our grad students to be heard out there about the fantastic work that they're doing. And it has reached a lot of places. We've had students on that they've had people in the UK email them saying, heard your podcast, love to talk more about your topic. And so it's little things like that. The reach of a podcast these days is really, really good. And so that really was an impetus for me in my role in the School of Graduate Studies, knowing that being part of a podcast is really, really important. And we want to keep it going. So that really was me. And to be honest, I actually quite like it. Put the radio voice on when it's time. No, get the old vocal cords ready and I'm in there. And the nice thing is I can talk in my way. I don't have to put on any airs and graces. This is just me talking. This is me having a chat with our students. And of course, it's a great opportunity for our students to practice talking to a general population as opposed to a program specific or a specialty, which is not easy, not always easy to do. So yeah, that's why I got in and I love it. I'm still doing it and I love it.
Oh, and we love that you're still doing it, Colette. You're so great on Grad Chat. And one of the things that I really admire about you, not just from Grad Chat, but from working with you in other contexts, is how students are always at the heart of everything you do. Even with that podcast for you, it's very clear that it's all about showcasing students and highlighting the work of students and creating this platform for students to share their voice. And something that I think both you and Amir have been very good at in your respective podcasts is getting people to open up and share their stories. And so I'm wondering if the two of you can speak to maybe how you do that, how you get people to open up and be vulnerable with you and share their stories, and maybe a little bit about what you've learned about communication strategies in general. So whoever wants to go first and try and tackle that.
I'm happy to go first because the microphone's on. So not trying to hog the microphone there, Amir. I think for me, to try and get people to open up, the first part is to set the scene with them. We're having a chat. Forget the fact it's being recorded. We're just having a chat. And I'm just like a new friend or colleague or whatever, wanting to get to know you a little bit more. And so if you can make people relaxed, then it's easier for them to open up. So the first part I always do is say, this is how the session's going to work. Because a lot of the times it's pre-recorded, and podcasts are pre-recorded. They're not live per se. If you make a mistake, it's okay, because guess what? We can edit that bit out. So it's putting people at ease at the beginning is really, really important. And also reminding them that, you're not talking to people necessarily in my situation in your field. So think about you talking to your mates, think about you talking to your uncles and aunts and cousins and things. How are they going to understand your work? So you have to think about that. The other thing I always say too, to help put them at ease, because they're not always sure, think about, what is your key message that you want to get across in this particular session? So I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to give your main point across first, then you can elaborate. Because if you go on too long, I can cut that off in the edited version. But the main thing when you're talking to media and things is you've got to get your point across really, really quickly. You don't want to get it lost. So put your point across first and then elaborate. And if we've got time, we can keep that elaboration in. And if not, we've at least got your main answer out there for the world to hear. So it's a matter of putting people at ease. And you normally find the first 5 minutes, people are a bit tense, and then they take that breath. And then they go, yeah, it is just a chat, isn't it? I go, absolutely. Let's just talk. And I'm going to throw things at you like anyone would in a normal conversation. And that's what it's about. Making people at ease.
That's wonderful. I think I did that myself, in the first 5 minutes. I was a little jittery and took that big deep breath. And I think the SaaS employee in me was listening to your strategies and hearing all these wonderful parallels with just good teaching strategies, setting out expectations, encouraging your interviewees to think about their audience, starting with the main idea and then developing and writing. Yes, those are just good writing practices. I'll digress though. Go ahead.
Can I add one more thing? The other thing that I think is really, really important as the interviewer is listening. Now, it has helped my listening skills big time, because if I'm speaking to people with an accent different to mine, and that's including Canadians who are born and bred here, but the accents, I have to listen a lot more carefully, because I need to be able to hear what they're saying, so then I can ask the next question and not make it look like, well, them thinking, well, I just answered that, didn't you hear me? So it's really helped my listening skills. It's still got a long way to go, but my listening skills are a lot better from it.
Oh, thank you. What do you think about that, Amir? You have excellent listening skills.
Oh, thank you very much. Sorry. So I think what we have done in International Voices was very much adopted from other podcasts like Grad Chat. And I think Colette has done a really good job to listen to people. And by the way, I'm fascinated by the fact that how you can go deep and engaged with the students and their topic. And there are so different topics all over the past, for example, years. And that's very fascinating for me. And I think the listening skill that you mentioned earlier is very important for the interviewer to pick up the moments that the guests want to talk about. Maybe they didn't have a chance to elaborate on. And so you would probably ask some little questions here and there to help them highlight what they wanted to do before. So I think I've had a harder time because of the language barrier that I have between me and the guests. So I had to listen much more carefully and put aside my judgment so that I can see the facts from their eyes, and so I can realize what is the thing that they want to share with us, so I can build up on that. And sometimes the questions, well, we have distributed the questions before the interview, but sometimes the questions help the conversation go in a way that we ended up sharing that and publish it, unless that, we didn't have planned beforehand. And also, I think something Colette also does that she didn't mention here, she sometimes crack a joke. And that's very helpful to smooth the mood in a way that I think when people laugh together, it's sometimes the stress goes up and unleash and overflows, and boom, it's done. I think it's very helpful to maybe create a funny environment and atmosphere so that the guests feel comfortable to share something with you, and then don't think about the stresses or the listener or the audience later on. He gets to the conversation with the interviewer only, and then you get the chance to, as you said, cut off the mistakes and the run on probably. So I think, yeah, these are the things that I've learned in the podcast so far.
Yeah, thank you both so much for sharing it. It seems like everything you described it's like an empathy building experience, between you and your guest or guests, putting them at ease and letting go of any judgments you might have and trying to put yourself in their shoes and keep them comfortable. I'm curious, when you think back on the interviews you've done so far in your podcasts, are there any interviews or any specific moments that really stand out to you in the experience?
So I think Colette has so many moments to share. So out of more than 150 probably episodes that you've done, I think it's much easier for me to pick 1 out of 7 interviews. So I think I've learned a lot from all of the guests that I had during the program. But I can remember that we were supposed to do a mock interview with Ian. He's a manager at SAS. And I was so concentrated on my questions and my conversation skills that I wanted to build up. And I wanted to hear the feedbacks later on from Lydia, who was at that point in that Zoom meeting. But Ian's words and sentences were so good that they hit me by surprise, and I found myself speechless and blown away during the interview. And I was like, oh wow, this is very touching. And it was so good that we ended up putting some of his answers to the first episode, and which is about the culture shock. And I think that interview will stay with me for a while, and I think I won't forget about it. And also, I want to highlight the music of the podcast, because I think conversations can be good, can be engaging, but sometimes students breathe emotions and feelings to words. And what Sadaf Amini has done, I think it was very great. And sometimes I replay the music with myself when I was walking, to help me think what I want to share, how do I gonna start the program, how I'm gonna end. And these are the moments that I can how can I elaborate this? These are the moments that I owe them for the music that Sadaf Amini has made, and I think that was a great job.
Oh, thanks, Amir. You're bringing back memories for me. So, I mean, the podcast International Voices at Queen's was something that I had dreamed up, and then included, Alyssa and then Amir came on, and I can remember sitting and listening to Ian and you in that interview, and yeah, we just thought it was going to be a practice session, and then we sat there for 45 minutes, and it was like I just got to sit and listen, turn my camera off, turn my mic off, and I was sitting there on the edge of my seat for 45 minutes. Like, it was just, the content was so impactful to me, and we were talking about cross-cultural experiences and different things, and then we ended up taking his interview, and it ended up being part of that first episode. And I remember when it finally, released, and we could listen to it on our phones, and I took it home and played it for my daughter, and she was like, do you know Amir? Like, he's famous. Like, you met Amir? Like, you met Ian, you met Sabrina? Like, anyways, it's been such an amazing experience, but none of it would be possible without you and all of the different guests that we've had on so far.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I really appreciate it.
Before we pass it over to you, Colette, I'll just share that I remember when Lydia shared the recording of that practice interview that ended up not being a practice, and it was so good. And it was this realization of this vision that Lydia had and the planning and the conversations. And I remember just thinking, oh, this is going to work. This is going to be good. Like, this is going to do, I think, what we want it to do. And yeah, I'll echo Lydia in saying, that the International Voices at Queen's podcast would not have been what it was without you, Amir, and without the the really genuine investment that you put into the project overall, and to creating these moments with each interviewee. So that, yeah, thank you for your work. But Colette, as Amir said, I'm sure you've got many stories, so I can't wait to hear what stands out.
Well, now you ask me. Well, yeah, over the years, there's been some amazing interviews that I've had. Some have been a bit, to be honest, some of them have been difficult because it's been very tricky to try and get the words out of the student in a way that people will understand. So particularly some of those students who are in fields of study where there's lots of formulas and things that go on, not always easy to put that into general terms for the rest of it. You know, they're looking at microscopic things and, well, that's great, but what does it mean out here for the rest of us? So there has been some tricky interviews, and I know at the end I think that was hard work, but we got there kind of thing. I do have a lot of help because, as Amir said, I give people a template to fill in for me to start with, to give me an idea of the kind of questions that they want me to ask them so they can answer, to give that main message. So I do that. I also ask them to give me a bit of an overview of their research, and sometimes I read that and I go, okay, not quite sure what that all means, and I pick out the odd word and I go on to Wiki and, you know, and try and figure out what these words mean. And there has been the odd occasion where I've totally got it wrong, but luckily I always go to the student first and like, can you explain that a little bit more for me, because I really need to do some background information. So once they realize, they go, oh, sorry, that's how I would write it for my field, I forget that I'm writing it for a different audience. So they change that wording, which helps me. So that's how I can get all that information. The good news is, all those interviews I've done, is that it gives me plenty of ammunition for all that small talk that you have to practice every now and then, because I can sound like I know everything in the world as long as they don't go past 2 questions. So that's really, really helpful. But I've had some delightful interviews, and there was one, gosh, it was probably 3 years ago now, and it was all about rice, arsenic in rice, from a chemist. And I was listening to this and I'm going, oh my God, that's why we're always told to, you know, wash our rice before we boil it and stuff like that, because it's to get rid of all those, well, I thought it was just to get rid of the starch, but there's some arsenic in there as well, just for everyone's sake. Don't worry, they're not lethal levels, but it is in the rice, right? Because it's come from the soils and things. So that was hilarious. I'm going, God, way to go, Mum, you told me the right thing to wash it. No idea why we did it, but we did it. And so that's one of the reasons, and that's always stuck with me. So that was one of them. Another one, I was talking to one of our students in environmental studies, and she's working with monkeys down in Costa Rica. And that was just a fabulous interview. The research itself was fascinating, but it was one of those sessions, and Amir, and I'm sure you've had this, where, you know, the repartee between us was just like we were having a cup of coffee and chatting, because we just laughed the whole way through, because we found everything funny, you know, this thing and this thing. And so that was also one of those sessions where I didn't want it to stop, to be perfectly honest. In fact, to then cut it down to 30 minutes for the show was really tricky, because I think I was close to an hour, because I didn't want to stop the recording. And that's when, you know, things are working well in that interview session. And then I've had other ones where, you know, mechanical engineers and things who are looking at special backpacks with, you know, battery power, but the battery is getting charged by you actually walking, because it's connected to your hips and things. And so it's the action of your hips that's recharging this backpack. So when you're up in the mountains and away from the normal grid, you can still recharge, you know, your batteries are still recharged, so you can still work on your computer to collect your samples and, you know, to put all your data entry in. And so again, fascinating, right? So all these little things that go on, it's intriguing, to be perfectly honest. And then, of course, the other part that I like is learning a bit more about some of our students' background, you know, why they came to Queen's in the first place, whether it's from another province or whether it's from another country. I always find that fascinating. You know, what are we doing here that's brought you to continue your research here at Queen's? So there's lots of good stories like that along the way.
Well,
So I stopped there.
I'm sure you could keep going. Those all
could.
sound fabulous. I know, you know, I don't host a podcast, but I know even in my own experience working with students, I feel like my knowledge of various subjects is really increased over the years of working for SAS, and I work with engineers, and I definitely don't have an engineering background, but you learn all of these little tidbits, and yeah, so thank you for sharing that, Colette.
Which can be dangerous if you know just a little.
Just enough for 2 questions, right?
Yes.
No, that's great. I've got a bit of a follow-up question for you. You know, it sounds like overall, both of you have had really wonderful experiences, and it sounds like the good and the positive and the exciting and engaging definitely outweighs any negatives. But you know, communication is hard. Sometimes hosting these interviews and getting people to open up can be hard, or figuring out what the student is talking about. If their subject is really technical, that can be challenging. So I'm wondering if, you know, Colette, I'll pose this to you. If you have any kind of lessons learned, or if there have been any challenges that you've had to overcome, or strategies for communication that you found really helpful to overcome these particular challenges when you've encountered them.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I alluded to it a little bit in my last answer, where, you know, it's getting that preparation first. So before putting a podcast together, you need to do some work yourself. You know, you've got to research some things and make sure you're actually on the same wavelength as the person you're going to be interviewing. So that's the first part. So if you can at least understand the topic that you're going to be discussing, that's a good start. Then, of course, you know, sometimes, you know, communication is not easy, and I struggle with it too. And I know people find that difficult to understand, but I do. I'm not always good at finding the right words to explain a certain topic. Like even now, I'm struggling now. I have to think about it really, really hard. So I can imagine what it's like on the other end when you're suddenly being put on the spot to answer a question. And some people are great. They can go straight away, and others have to sit back. So one of the things I say with our students that, and again, we have the good fortune that it's pre-recorded, that take your time. You don't have to always rush. So if you have to take an extra breath or a couple of extra seconds, take it to formulate the answer that you would like to do. If I hear that the answer was struggled, you know, and it's probably not the right word, but they struggled to answer it, I'm quite happy to say, are you happy with the answer, or would you like to say it again? Or, because often they have another way of saying it straight away. I'm the same. I can say something, and then for the rest of the evening I say, if only I'd said it like this, that would have made so much more sense. So if you've got an opportunity for them to, if you feel the flow of the answer wasn't particularly great, it might be okay, but could it have been done better? Give them an opportunity to say it again, because we can edit it out. Because at the end of the day, what you want to produce is a good show, but you also want to make sure that your interviewee is happy with what is put out there. It's not about me. Are they happy with the end product? Because if they're not happy, we don't want to put it up, right? So if it means giving them a bit more time with that communication, for whatever reason, give it to them. We can stop the recording and we can start it again, or we can edit out. So if it was live, it would be a little harder, but then maybe you want to, if they're really, really nervous, give them a bit of coaching beforehand, those sorts of things. But knowing communication is tricky. We just have to be patient And sometimes it's trying to draw it out. So sometimes the way I've done it is they're not quite getting the answer that I'm expecting. So I'll ask the question again in a different way, because maybe they didn't quite understand what I was asking. So let me ask it in a different way. Same with those same with exams, right? Exam questions, I always think they're trying to trick me. So I read it the wrong way. The same with when people ask you a question. Have they actually understood your question? So you may have to ask it in a different way.
Those are all such wonderful strategies. And what really strikes me is how collaborative you are with the people you're interviewing. There's not this hierarchy of this is my show and you have to conform to me. There's this really, I think, inclusive and respectful acknowledgement that it can be really vulnerable to go on a podcast and be interviewed, and you're representing yourself in a particular way, and people want to have some control over that representation. Amir, just any thoughts to add to this?
Well, I think Colette has explained that very nicely. I think I'm going to pick up from her last statement, because sometimes it's very common in an international environment that somebody will misunderstand what you want to look for, or the other side, the other way around, because sometimes I ask the guest, what's your opinion about this? And I can remember one student from Japan. She told me that I don't have a challenge to be in a national environment to speak with other people. It's cool, always good, and I think it's going to be good. And when I elaborated on that, I realized that she even went to write down the sentences that she wanted to convey to other students. And I was like, isn't it a challenge? I mean, I define it as a challenge, but the way that you are saying this, the way that you have the expression of it, it's not a challenge for you. But I think maybe we need to talk about this, because our listeners should know about the ways of the communication that they can have with other students. So that was some awkward moments that I needed to re-ask my question in another way, so that the students, or the guests, can build up on that. And I think, most of them were covered by Colette. I think most of the strategies. So
that's great observations, and I think it goes back to what you were talking about before, and creating this space of ease for your guests and trying to put themselves into their shoes. And sometimes we need to ask the question again in a different way, and in order to try to get them to
can I
share
add something else? Sorry to interrupt. I just remembered that the first couple episodes, I did put so many hours to edit the episodes. I can remember one episode just took 40 hours for me to edit them, cut off the extra conversations, the pauses and all. So I use this, after the feedback I got from the editing part, I realized, okay, I have to ask in this way. I have to just prevent the conversation going to that route, because it's going to be awkward, and then it's very hard to bring it back. So those sort of feedbacks that I got from my friends, and also the editing part, is very informative in terms of how I'm going to act on it, on the next episodes, and then on the next subject. Sorry about the interrupting.
Oh yeah, very, very time consuming. I think most people don't realize how time consuming, and I know Alyssa and I certainly didn't when we were planning this. But in order to do it well, it takes time. But you've done such a great job, Amir. And thinking about that and the environment you created, and the context you've created for your guests. They have an opportunity on both of your podcasts to tell their stories and to highlight what's important to them based on their experiences or their research. And how do you hope the Queen's community has been impacted by engaging with the voices on your podcasts?
I'll go first. Sorry, Colette. As the host of the podcast, yeah, I think, taking my responsibility into account, I want the podcast to be as much popular as it can be. But apart from that, I think I really prefer more students engage with the university's resources. You see, earlier in the program, I talked about the importance of sharing and documentation and how the community can grow based on the act of people share the knowledge with others. But I guess the cycle would not be complete. The cycle of teaching and learning would not be complete unless somebody reads them, somebody listens to them. So, it's not very meaningful to produce something that nobody will ever use. So I hope that International Voices and similar programs like Grad Chat raise students' awareness of the Queen's rich and very fascinating resources and help them choose based on their needs. For instance, Quick and SAS provide students with a huge amount of high quality resources, and they alone, I believe that they alone are enough for students to thrive academically. But usually they are underutilized. The workshops, the one-on-one interviews, the huge amount of resources that they have on their websites. So I'm going to end with this. I can remember one of my first conversation with Colette and also Amanda. Amanda isn't here at Quick. I was nagging about how the student guidebook is so long. Can you remember that? I don't know if you can recall it. The fact that
it still is.
All right, yeah. I was sometimes laughing. All right, I think it was so long that I tried so hard to at least just read it once, but I couldn't. I couldn't finish that. It's very unlikely for any students to be able to finish that whole guidebook. And the fact that, it's not that students are lazy or don't have interest, don't have the interest to find resources. It's very time consuming and take energy to find resources and selects them based on their needs. So I think probably not many students would have that time, but those who have, they are not that adventurous that they need to be to find the resources. So Colette and Amanda agreed with me at that time, and they said they will think about it. And I'm very happy that Lydia defined this project. And can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, your video is frozen, but we can still hear you.
Okay, so I'm very happy that Lydia proposed this project and Alyssa supported, and we go through this route. And I hope that International Voices fulfills its goals at the end, especially in connecting students with the resources that university offers.
Well said, Amir. It's a bit hard to follow up on that one. And you're right, the International Voices podcast is super, super important. But when it comes to Grad Chat, one of the things, there's several goals, in my opinion, for Grad Chat. One, of course, is that dissemination of the research that we're doing here at Queen's. I would love it to go all over the world and like to see lots of people listening in or playing it themselves as they're in the car or going for walks or whatever. So that is absolutely one part, because that's going to help our students. What's more important to me, I think, in my role in the School of Graduate Studies, is giving an opportunity for our students to learn how to talk about their research to a different audience, because that is not easy. If you're doing a PhD, you're very specialized, but we got to allow other people to understand what you're doing that makes sense to them. They don't need to always know the the minute part of it. They need to know the big picture. How is it going to affect me or someone that I know or the environment that I live in, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, that's the important part, is giving our students an opportunity to learn how to communicate to different audiences in different formats, and this is just one particular format, and thinking about it so they can have those conversations with their family and let them know what they're doing. We have other opportunities to learn how to present. The 3-minute, SAS does a lot of workshops. We have the 3-minute thesis is another way of doing it. My tax puts on some great workshops as well. Sometimes you're going to get thrown in front of a TV camera. Are you ready for that? Often the time you don't know they're going to show up, but there they are, because suddenly you've done something that they're really interested in, and they're going to fly on in and say, what do you think about this? Well, if you've got a few little lines already sorted out, that elevator pitch sort of material, then you can answer that question and feel comfortable with your answer. So the podcast is giving our students an opportunity to learn that side of it, and also to realize it's not as scary as it looks. You can overcome it, because as a researcher, for instance, and we don't just have researchers, but we have other students on as well. It's important to be able to be comfortable with what you're talking about. And the more practice you get, the better you are at it. So I think for me, that's what's really important. It's an opportunity for our students to learn another skill, which is not an easy skill to learn and for any of us. So.
Yeah, very well said. Great answers from both of you. And I really love how throughout this whole interview, your contributions have really complemented each other. And I think, reflecting on the responses to this last question, what I really appreciate is how both of your podcasts in very different ways seek to support students as whole, holistic people. That Student Academic Success Services falls within the Student Life and Learning portfolio, and our approach within that portfolio, within the Division of Student Affairs, is to see the whole student experience, to support the whole student experience. And academic success means more than just what ends up on paper, what those letter grades are at the end. And I think the platforms that both of you have created have really contributed to that whole student experience success journey, words, whatever, you know what I mean. And so we've got 10 minutes left, and I do want to give our audience an opportunity to ask their questions or share their thoughts. So if anybody has a question, please raise your hand and we'll call on you and you can turn on your mic. Alternatively, you can send a question in the chat or send me your question privately if you want to keep it anonymous, and I will share it with our guests.
Because otherwise Amir and I will just fill in the time.
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm going to use the opportunity to thank Colette for especially expanding Horizons workshops. And I think they are wonderfully, contributing in developing students, both academically and their career. And I think when it's not something that students will, expect that all of the workshops should be perfect so that they can attend, but some moments during that workshops, they can change lives. This is for sure. This has happened for me. And I think we can advertise more. And, I'm very thankful for them, by the way. And thank you. I'm very grateful to the opportunity that I had to attend.
Amir, you've been very kind. And of course, the School Graduate Studies couldn't put this on without collaborating with a lot of our partners on campus, such as SAS and QUIC and CTL and Career Services and things. So this is the nice thing about being in an institution. There's a lot of opportunities to work with each other because we're all wanting to do the same thing. We all want to sort of help support our students along the way. So that's why we work so much together. And I know, Amir, you've been in a lot of our dissertation boot camps.
Yes.
Unfortunately, they've all been probably virtual, but we will get back to an in-person one soon. But again, as you were talking about with workshops and development, personal development is both academic, it's professional, and it's personal. So there's a lot of things that we can do. So our boot camps, although it's helping you with your academics, it's also helping you create connections on campus. And that's important as well to help your journey, whatever that journey may be.
Yeah.
That is a perfect segue into the question we got in the chat, this idea of creating connections. one of our audience members has asked, how can we have more students, staff, and faculty tune in? You know, we put these great things out. How do we get people to actually access them?
I'm going to go first because I have thought about it a lot, because I've realized this is a problem. This is a serious problem. I am a student, and from my perspective, it's amazing why students not, participating in these excellent, high-quality workshops and opportunities. This is, I think we are living in a very overloaded and overflowed era of information, and students probably have less time than before to find their free time to just fit in these workshops and extra general activities that they can learn from. So most of their times are filled up with other things that may be necessary, maybe not, but if they get time, they prefer to expend their time doing their coursework. So I realized that in order to, promote these opportunities and resources on campus, we can have a general course at the beginning of the program. Each program have a course introducing those resources in a very nice manner, so that they can pick whatever they decide, whatever they need. And because maybe it's surprising to you that when even me, that I have close friends, I talk to them a lot, about the resources that I participate a lot. They tell me, wow, this is really free. You can go on a one-on-one appointment, and they can, help you correct your misspelling or grammar for free. Are you kidding me? I was just, oh, come on, you have to just look up the SAS website once to see this opportunity. Why don't you do that? And the most common answer that I get oh, come on, I don't have a time. I prefer to do my coursework whenever I want to put my time on academia. But this is not only about academia. As you said, it's personal development. And I think if they know about it, they will tune in.
And I think if we're talking about podcasts per se, I mean, there's a lot of podcasts out there at the moment. So one of the ways that we've looked at is, whenever we've done a particular interview, I always give a copy of edited copy to our students, so they can post it on their own website if they have it. They can post it on their program website to show prospective students, this is what I'm doing at Queen's, kind of thing. So that's one way of doing it, of getting the message out there more than just on Spotify, Google Podcasts, etc., etc. So that's one way internally we can do it. The second one is always, as you said, letting people know this is happening, and you too can be a part of it. So if you too can be a part of it, maybe you want to listen to some. So that's one way. Another one, in terms of the faculty and staff, sometimes a little harder. What we're lucky now is some of those, because a lot of ours are to do with the research and Grad Chat. So the research website now has Grad Chat listed as one of those podcasts. So people who come into Queen's to listen or to figure out what research is going on at Queen's, they can visualize it through stories, but they can also listen to it on a podcast. So there's different ways that it's not always easy. Like I said, I would love more people to listen in. To me, the first part is getting the student to have an opportunity, but then it's being a bit more creative of how we can get more people to listen. So let's use our connections on campus, whether it's person to person, or whether it's going to departments and saying, this is coming up, or like for this one, we've got a special one coming. We had a special one this week to do with International Education Week. So, highlighting it through a particular event that's coming up. We might have had the 3-minute thesis, so we'll bring some of them back on to do a podcast as well. So instead of talking about their work for 3 minutes, I'm going to give them 30 minutes. So, expand kind of thing. And then maybe we can link that up from the 3-minute thesis website with also the podcast. So there's trying to find other links is the way to go. But yeah, it's not an easy one, but there are just some ways we can do it.
Thank you both so much for addressing what is really a tricky question. And, I appreciate how you kind of identified the importance of intersections and finding opportunities to tap into existing programs and to connect with various networks and this kind of spider web approach. And yeah, I think the more collaboration we can have across services and units and departments and faculties, the better. We are coming up to the end of our hour. So Amir, Colette, I will thank you both so much again for being here today and sharing your insights. I'm sure our audience really appreciated your perspectives on hosting podcasts and talking to students and finding ways to showcase the amazing contributions that students bring in and outside the classroom, and sharing your thoughts on how we can support students and support each other in the work that we all do. It's been really wonderful to hear from you and to speak with you. And thank you to everyone who tuned in today and joined us in celebrating International Education Week. I hope you'll tune in on Sunday to the Isabel Bader Center live stream of the Isfahan concert featuring Sadaf Amini, who provided the music for the International Voices at Queen's podcast. And stay tuned with Sass and Quick for information on future seasons of the podcast and next year's International Education at Queen's conference. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. All right, you'll listen to the bonus episode of the first season of International Voices at Queen's, a podcast produced by the Queen's University International Center and Student Academic Success Services. I would like to thank Sadaf Amini for creating the music for this episode. Please support her work on her website, sadafamini.ca, and other social media apps. I would also like to thank CFRC and Sylvia for the support. On behalf of the producers, Lydia, Alyssa, and myself, thank you all for listening to this episode. Please stay connected with us on social media and provide suggestions you would like us to talk about in future seasons. Goodbye and take care.
Thank you, Amir. Thank you, Colette.
Grad Chat. Grad Chat. Grad Chat.